Host, and I have Dr. Jim Slaughter here with me today.
Hey everyone, it's good to be here with you.
We wanted to talk to you today about narcissism and how it affects the family, and how it is also tied up with a form of socialism, communism, control. So we see it in the family in our clinic. We see narcissism in the family, so we're going to talk about that, but we're also going to talk about how it's spread into the world and how it started, I guess, really starting after World War II.
Yeah, it's noted, first of all, in the 1950s, just after the Second World War, and it just keeps getting worse.
So a simple term for a narcissistic family, I specialize in blended families, so I want you to know that we are family systems, so we look at the whole family. A narcissistic family is one in which the needs of the parents are focused on, and the children are expected in various ways to meet the needs of the parents. So the healthy family model is kind of turned on its head. Instead of parents trying to meet the needs of the kids, it's the other way around. Or it can be one parent, okay? And so they're supporting the parents rather than the children being fostered and taken care of by the parents, actually. And as in other kinds of dysfunctional families, there's abuse, verbal or emotional or physical, and corresponding denial of the abuse. And so we see on TV so much denial, just flat out lying, doing horrible things, and then acting like they didn't do it or it was a lie. Lots of lying. And so we notice that what we see in the family when we get a narcissist in a family or a narcissistic family dynamic, it's being played out in the world. It's being played out in America to the nth degree. So we just felt like we really wanted to let you know. So these are kind of the unspoken rules in a narcissistic family that we're going to talk about. And I know you had some stuff you wanted to add too.
Well, I might go forward on the post-war era and that kind of introducing the narcissism problem. There's an interesting phenomenon that you and I have both witnessed and been a part of. One was 9/11, and I was in New York City a week after 9/11 happened and was at the ground zero and things like that. And you know, I being from the Southwest, Southwest, we're kind of used to the good old boy syndrome, you know, and people are friendly here for the most part. And we've heard stories and known people from New York City who just seem, we heard about them being rude and outspoken and self-focused and all that stuff. Well, when I was up there, I mean, everybody was friendly, they were cordial, they were open, they were helpful. The police officers there were just incredibly nice and helpful, and yes, sir, what can I do to help you, sir, and things like that. And I was amazed. But that's what happens. I just read an article by a fellow named Dennis Chen, a Chinese fellow American guy, but who was talking about this. And he was saying that whenever there's crisis, the narcissistic tendency is less because people have a tendency to bind themselves together, come together to weather the storm, to get through the crisis. And so even people who might not be particularly friendly in those cases are. We witnessed it in the freeze. We had such a terrible freeze here a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And neighbors got together. They brought wood. They brought something hot to drink. They invited people over. All kinds of things.
We had a neighbor that put on Facebook, "Hey, I'm making hot chocolate and coffee. If anybody is cold, and come on over. My electricity's on." Right. And I went to France after 9/11. And I had never been to Paris itself. People always talk about Paris and how rude people are and all that. Well, it wasn't like that at all. Just like you experienced in New York City, people were so friendly and so warm and so glad to have us there. And it was because, nobody was coming.
Right.
And they were just so glad to see people and so nice. And that's what happens after a crisis.
Yeah, and what Shen is writing about here is kind of a global phenomenon that when nations are in crisis, people tend to come together, and especially if there's an enemy that they can point out there somewhere. And so that's what we've experienced a number of times. But he's suggesting that the farther we get from World War II, and the older those generations are becoming, the more narcissism we're seeing, that self-focus, that arrogance that goes beyond arrogance, though, and is so destructive, so damaging. And he's saying that it's happening more and more through his research in as the generations now are coming up and getting older, it's worse than it ever has been.
Well, yes, and why after World War II? Well, we in our brilliance and smartness, we brought over all of these Nazis. We wanted their data, we wanted their knowledge, all the scientists and all the researchers and all the rocket scientists and all these people. Russia was going to get them, and we wanted to get them first. We didn't want them to get all that information that was left behind. So we grabbed these people and all their family members and brought over, and these are people that worked in the camps that were doing scientific research on Jews and doing horrible, horrible things. Well, we brought them all over here and their families. It was about 3,000 people, Nazis.
This is documented through
it was called Operation
Paperclip. Yeah.
And so they came here, and not only were they here, we put them in high positions. Like von Braun, what was his whole name?
Werner von Braun.
Von Braun.
There
are so many
scientists.
And started, pharmaceutical companies from that. Just that's why they're all Jewish names. Just a lot of really
in German. Yeah.
So we started having a communist Nazi section. How do you say it? Socialist, communism, all started growing in our country.
Mentality.
Yeah. And so it just keeps growing. But let's. One of the things when we talk about a narcissistic family, one of the main things is there are these unspoken rules in these families. And so that really dictate the interactions. And if you're not part of this family, you don't know it until you might visit. So I visited a home and stayed there for a few days. And I took a shower, came downstairs, and no one talked to me. Not my friend, not the parents, no one. And I did not know what was going on. And he pulled me aside and said, "You did not squeegee the shower." I was like, "What?" I didn't know. I mean, I was young. We didn't have a shower. We had a bathtub. We were in an old house. And I told him, he was like, "Squeegee, the glass, you get the squeegee." And I was like, "No." So he took me up. He showed me how to do it. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Why do you do that? It keeps the soap scum." It sounded really cool when he told me why. And then I told him, "Well, I didn't have a shower." And then they felt really bad for me. Oh, the poor child who can't afford a shower. And then they were all nice to me again. But what I left there realizing, I didn't even for them all to stop talking to me. They were mean. And I thought, over the shower not being squeezed, something that I didn't even know. Right? That was what we would call a narcissistic family. Some people call them toxic families, but it's not specific enough. A narcissistic family really has all these unspoken rules. So acceptance is conditional, which I found out there really, really fast.
Oh, man.
Right?
Yeah.
So I began to wonder what else is there that I don't know. And so they kind of have their own rules for people. Acceptance is based on those rules, but they can change. Depending on who the narcissist is in the house. So submission is required. That's the other thing. The only way you are accepted is if you submit.
No questions asked.
Yes.
Just submit. It really becomes very dictatorial, doesn't it? This is a dictatorship we're talking about.
Well,
at the family level.
And so when we're talking about this at the family level, we want you can see it on the news, you can see it in politics, you can see it in our world. Acceptance is conditional on you submitting. Submission is required. Mm-hmm. And if you don't submit, you will be canceled. Okay? You will be canceled from your friends. You will be canceled from your family. You might be canceled from the bank. If you're in the Mormonism, they cancel you, right? You can't. And so just in our world, everybody's being canceled because they're not fully submitting. And it doesn't matter how much logic. It doesn't even matter if you're right. It only matters that you didn't do what the narcissist said.
Right. They don't have to be right.
No. No, so I had a family that the dad put pepper in the boy's milk. It was kind of a trick when he went to the bathroom. And so when he came back out, the boy saw the pepper in the milk. And so he was telling me the story. And so he didn't want to drink it. And the dad was hoping he wouldn't see it. He'd drink it and it'd be funny. But the boy saw it and he was like, oh, and he didn't drink it. And the dad told him he had to drink it. And he was like, I don't want to drink it. So the dad sent him to his room without dinner. Okay. So because he did not obey his dad. And the mom was like, don't make him do that. But mom went along, right? So someone also, this is the thing. There are things that happen in the world and in your home that are just accidents, right? And so,
That's right.
But not for these people. Narcissists always have to blame somebody. Someone always has to be to blame.
Yeah.
And it's not them, never them, right?
No, never them.
But there's always someone.
You know, this brings up something, you know, that is a part of my specialty, which is stress and anger. And blaming people and having to blame someone, find somebody who was responsible for whatever happened, even though maybe no one's to blame. But having to find someone to blame creates anger in that whole situation.
Right. Because it's unfortunate there already was an accident, and that makes it hard.
Right. Yeah. And so that is an anger producing thought distortion. And there are others, but that's a big one.
Yes. So, and it's hard because, like, if you have a flat tire and you're like, oh man, we have a flat tire, it will become, why did you drive this way? Or why did you pick this car? Or why didn't you stay on that side of the road? So immediately somebody starts getting blamed.
Yeah.
Usually the driver, or it doesn't even have to be the driver. And so typically there's a family scapegoat, though, in the family. There's always one person, usually, who ends up being the scapegoat most of the time.
Yeah, they get the focus and the impact of all that stuff.
Yeah. And as long as they're there, they're kind of made to kind of carry those family burdens as the scapegoat. And so eventually these people, spouse or child, will leave. It's not that then there's no more scapegoat. Somebody else becomes the scapegoat.
You know, also we've seen grandparents be the scapegoat, and it's not like you often can just leave. They have to endure sometimes if they're going to stay. And that is such a sad, horrible situation because it's so unjust. And grandmother or the grandmother, the granddad, whoever's there, they probably are beyond the place in their life where they can make it on their own. They may be retired or semi-retired, but they just got to put up with that stuff, that dictatorial kind of treatment and being the scapegoat. Everything is their fault. You know?
So, you know, when we say acceptance is conditional, differences, expressions of difference, uniqueness is not accepted.
Nope.
Right? Expressions are rejected. Okay, it's kind of pathological the way it is, but everyone's expected to submit no matter how cruel it is, no matter how arbitrary it is, no matter how wrong it is or destructive it is. And then the blaming, the dominant narcissist will, if there's only one, then it'll be that one. But if there's two, the stronger one, they just do a lot of self-loathing of the other person. You know, there's a self-loathing of themselves. Have you seen that? If there's the dominant one, the more stronger one.
I think it's hard to spot sometimes, but you know, you may be better at it though.
Well, there's accidents happen, family problems can happen, and when you blame people, everyone is frustrated. So there's a lot of frustration, and if anyone tries to call the narcissist on his stuff at all, he just kind of self-loathes. I mean, it's kind of hard to hold him accountable. So either he will refuse any blame whatsoever, or he'll do this extreme thing that I'm just a bad guy, and I do everything wrong, and they'll just do this whole self-pity thing. Well, it's extreme, right? Yeah. So that's the hard part. So really, honestly, I think the hardest thing in these families, we have to walk on eggshells all the time.
Don't you hate that?
And that's what's happening in our country. People just feeling so scared of social media now. Businesses being afraid to even put an ad out there. Comedians being afraid to ever tell a joke. It causes so much fear and frustration and distrust. Like, who can you trust, right? Because I know during COVID, people felt like their family because they hadn't had a vaccine, their family like threw them under the bus. I had one woman say they would turn me over to an internment camp. They would turn me over to the Nazis if that ever happened. I mean, it's like they felt like their family betrayed them.
You know, that actually happened in World War II.
Yeah.
People were paid to turn in their neighbors for what they would say or what they would think or whatever it might have been. And God forbid that it would become that way here. But, you know, the thing
It is, though, because somebody will post something on social media.
Yeah, no, I know.
And before you know it, it's all over the news and people, oh, look, they put that. So it really does get back to the bad people, right? The people who are going to cancel you, or the people who are going to judge you. You know, if you look at the migrants, the legal migrants, whatever you call them now, coming across the border here in Texas, they're coming across. It's so dangerous. They're everywhere. But when they bust them to another place, and they only bust 50, oh, it's just so horrible on these migrants, these illegals. And yet it's horrible at the border here. It's horrible. And so you see it's totally illogical, it's irrational, but you're not allowed to say it. Same thing that happened during COVID. Now they're saying, okay, hydroxychloroquine's okay, ivermectin's okay. Yeah, natural immunity actually works. And so this is, but what they're not doing, nor are any family members, coming back and apologizing to following the crowd, just to fit in. The following the crowd, just so they didn't get made fun of, following the crowd when it was wrong. And they did a lot of really horrible, damaging things. They never have apologized. The media's not apologizing, you know? And so we're not allowed to be different. So all those doctors who came forward immediately and knew how to treat COVID, they had their license taken away. They had so many horrible things. They were just, you know, you can't be disbarred in medicine, but whatever they did, they couldn't practice anymore. And now, oh, okay, natural immunity is good. Well, what about the medical board went after all those people?
It's a travesty.
Yes. And that's part of in a family, right? So difference is dangerous. Vulnerability is dangerous.
Speaking up is dangerous.
Sharing your opinion or even making a mistake.
Yeah.
Because remember, accidents always have a person to blame. So you don't want to be the target of that. So having an accident or showing a weakness, you become a target.
Yeah,
right?
Sure do.
It's very dangerous. Even when you take responsibility and you apologize, it's still not okay. You can't come out of it on your side. Children can't, oh, I'm so sorry, and then it be fine.
No, they will pay.
They will pay.
Yeah.
They will pay. They will hold it against them. They will remember that for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And they'll probably even tell their girlfriend or boyfriend in the future. So the hard part is this, we see this in families, and it is so different than regular families. Regular families don't treat people like that. They don't act like that. People are just able to be themselves.
Yeah, healthy families. They let people speak. They let people express their opinions, feel their feelings, share their feelings. They dialogue together, and that doesn't mean that there's no leadership. It means that the kids, everyone is free to speak up and share what's on their mind. And
it's so much easier to have fun, right? You can have fun when everybody's just relaxed, and it's easy and you can be yourself. It's okay to have fun. If you're nervous and anxious and worried, terrified, it makes it hard to ever have fun. Because if you are happy, well, happy might be okay. But if you're too happy, then you're goofy or something, right? If you're, you can be sad, but you can't cry. You can be, so the emotions for you, anyway, the children, not the parent who's the narcissist, right? Their behavior range is so small they're so intolerant of other people, but yet they are all over the map with their emotions, the narcissists themselves.
Yeah, they act out terribly.
Terribly,
often, and they rage. On the anger spectrum, they rage often, and they take it out on everyone else in the family, especially the scapegoat.
Oh, and they expect you to take their side. The other parent or the children, I mean, you have to take sides.
Yeah.
And it's got to be the narcissist side. Mm-hmm. You don't really get a choice in that. And if you don't, what happens?
you get in big trouble
Yeah.
and canceled and spanked maybe or whatever if they still do that.
And then the kids have to choose between the parents or a sibling or, it's hard. It's hard. There's never enough love and respect, right? And what we want families to be is loving and respectful.
Accepting.
Yes. Yeah, one to another. We say in families, it's not okay for anyone to be disrespectful. Right. Parents shouldn't be disrespectful to the children, nor should the children be disrespectful to the parents.
Right. And we encourage people to install really solid, good boundaries. And there are consequences if a good boundary is transgressed.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it is an engaging community where everyone has a voice and everyone is respected.
Well, and I feelings are just wrong. You can't, your feelings are not important. You're just supposed to do what you're told. And so having your feelings shown, that's where even crying can be a problem. You're showing your feelings. You're not, these families, they expect you to be okay. You're just supposed to be okay, no matter what. And a lot of these kids take on that. They'll just be okay no matter what happened. They'll come in here and they'll start talking to me or to us, and it'll be amazing some of the things that have happened to them. And they just are not, it's not okay to show emotion, I guess.
Right.
So.
Right. And, believe me, narcissism is catching in a way too, or it can be if a kid grows up in a home with a narcissist leader of some kind. I think there's this tendency that you said to back away, shut down, get numb, all that so they don't get in trouble. But you got to wonder when a child grows up in an environment like that, are they going to become like that narcissist? Or are they just going to become a wallflower and never say anything?
They'll be one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll either be like that, because they're learning all the coping skills from the narcissist and the passive parent. If they're both, and I've had two narcissists, okay? I've had two personality disorders as parents. But usually it's a narcissist and a real passive person. And so they either end up one or the other, and really neither are good.
Right. Neither is good. That's right.
Yeah. Because, feelings are human, and we need to have our needs met as humans. And if you're not able to get your needs met because you can't even share your emotions or your feelings or your needs or your wants, because yours are not important. There's only one person in that family that are important, and it's not you.
Right. It's somebody else.
Yeah. And so, there'll be a golden child. Yeah. One child that they'll decide, because that child will side all the time with the narcissist. Really, that child is trying to survive. They're just trying to survive in that environment. They'll always side with the narcissist. They'll even that's how they can become more like that, because they do get rewards for doing that. All kids want their way. All kids want rewards. And so what can happen is they can become the golden child, and then the other child can be the scapegoat.
The other kids know they're the golden child too.
Yeah.
They know who it is. So, yeah.
Well, and what's interesting about narcissists is respect for one person means you have to disrespect the other person. So if you're in a blended family, and I do see this, if the stepmom or the mom, usually, let's say the stepmom is a narcissist, she will expect the kids to only love her, not their mom.
Right.
So it can't be that stepmom's a good person, mom is a good person. They both can be good people. No. Narcissists, they have to demonize people. So they have to divide. So they can only be the one that's good. Now, if it's children, they'll have a child that'll be, that's the child. That's the golden child. And the other kids, no. Well, then later, it becomes a different child. If that child eventually starts turning on them, then there's another golden child. But it's not everyone. It's not every child. They can't do it. They have to demonize respect and disrespect. They're not really an awe of people, but they'll have the people they respect, people they don't, people they like, people they don't like. It's not like you can be both. So a dad and a stepdad can't both be good people. Two sons cannot both be good people. One is good and one is bad. They have to devalue people. It's very strange.
And that's a word that's used commonly when we look into narcissism.
Yeah.
Devalue.
Yes.
Narcissists have to devalue the people in their wake. I mean, who end up in their wake. A narcissistic husband will devalue his wife and make sure that she knows she is of very little value.
Well, and so since we're talking about a husband and wife, when you date a narcissist, usually it's the best you're ever going to get. They
be on their best behavior.
Yes. And extreme. I mean, they will be obsessive about you. They will be crazy about your body. They'll be crazy about you, right? But once you marry that person, and it can happen overnight, once you marry that person, things immediately start to change. And you become less valuable to them. Some incredibly start devaluing you. Some it's much more subtle. Mm-hmm. But things do immediately change. So if you marry somebody and on the wedding night, boom, things are different. Or the next day, things are different. You get married and all of a sudden, oh, you need to be off all your medicine. I don't believe in mental health problems or whatever that is, right? Like that's immediately devaluing you.
Yeah, it sure is. And, we often the wedding date for people who are in that situation gets put off.
It can.
And the narcissist will dangle, like a carrot, dangle the idea of a wedding and marriage and all of that in front of the other person. It's almost like suckering them in.
Well, but they have to already have them. Like, that's after they know they've sucked them in. Like, they can lure the carrot about, oh, we'll get, when we get married, it's going to be so great. Oh, our kids will be so great when we're married, whatever, right? They'll do that.
Yeah.
But that's if they believe they already have you and they're not going to lose you. Then they don't necessarily have to marry you. Like if you move in with them and you're not married. The tough thing, though, is that they can also do the opposite, where in order to reel you in and have you quickly, they always want to marry fast or have you move in. So they don't have to have you marry them if you'll move in with them. Or if they know, because often young people, they can't marry them that young, right? And so they wait. But so anyway, it's either one or the other. But they still have to have you kind of trapped before that.
Yeah, there has to be this. If a person's aware of what's happening in those days, there's got to be a sense of feeling trapped or at least controlled.
Yeah, and it's not cooperation in the family. When we think of a family, or you think of, like the Republicans and the Democrats cooperating, right? It isn't that. It's competition. Always competition, not cooperation. They have to be smarter than you. They have to be better than you. And with a child trying to race their dad will win. Like they don't try to let the little kid win. It's always competition. And in families, what you really need, and in cities and in towns and in organizations, you need cooperation.
Right.
Well, we don't have that. Cooperation is, we are in like a dog-eat-dog world. It's like the top dog. It is tough now. People don't cooperate.
And just going back real quickly to this article by Shin, he was saying that very thing has created this kind of a national narcissistic tendency, has created the partisanship that we see in our country today politically and all over the world, not just America, but it is strong here. Partisanship is so incredibly entrenched here now, and he attributes it to a kind of narcissistic tendency. Yeah,
because narcissism, they do this one-upmanship.
Yeah.
They always have to one-up you. Favoritism, right? They always have to do that. And so there's this constant comparison. You're never good enough. They're always comparing you. They're always looking at, well, they're better than you and blah, blah, blah. And so you don't want to be a target of that. You really don't want to be a target of that. But it undermines trust and,
sure does.
And it causes hostility. When you're talking about something and you say, hey, I went skateboarding and I really loved it. And they'll be like, oh, I skateboarded, I'm better, blah, blah, blah. You immediately don't feel good about that person.
Right.
It's weird when people do that. And so, it just undermines trust and breeds hostility, really.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about hostility, rage is normalized now. Being enraged, people are angry. Again, ergo Jim's book, Mastering the Anger Within. People are, it's like everyone can be enraged. So if you disagree with somebody, well, you can just go kill them. Our politicians are saying that.
Yeah.
There are mayors are saying that. They're out there, well, I don't agree with them, go kill them. Just kill them. MAGA, go kill MAGA people. Like, what the heck is that? That is rage normalized. You can be enraged. So somebody put on our neighborhood Facebook that they got run off the road by a driver yesterday. And there was a guy saying, well, what did you do to them that made them do that?
Right.
And people immediately started saying, what? It is never okay to run someone off the road.
Right. Well,
I don't agree with that. The guy was, I don't agree with that. I think that, and it's like there was one other guy that got in and said, he thinks you should be able to do that. If somebody enrages you, I'm thinking, oh my goodness. That's exactly, normally there was a time when we'd call that like a bubba or, I don't know, we had names for people that behave like that. But now that has become the norm. If they don't agree with you, then you blow up on them, you rage at them, and now it even can go to the place of killing them or setting their business on fire or blowing up their house or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't mean to get so...
And we've seen that happen. And most of the people listening to or watching this broadcast have seen that on television happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so in families, that's the abuse that happens, right?
Yeah.
If you don't go along with drinking the milk with the pepper in it, you can get beaten, right?
Right.
No matter how crazy it is, you can get put in a closet. Like Harry Potter was put in a closet. He had to sleep in a closet, like under the stairs or something.
Oh, Harry.
I'm just saying.
Sorry.
So, it's just, but this is the norm. These people are unstable. And we watch it multiplying, unstable people. Whereas there was a time, we didn't get too many families like that. They were really not the norm by any means. They are still not the norm. They aren't. We get families that have problems, but they're not this problem.
Right.
This is abnormal. That is why it's called a personality disorder. But we see it in the media, we see it in the politics, and we see people heading up organizations that use rage and violence to get their way.
Yeah, just imagine, as you think about this, a nation narcissized, a narcissistic nation. We were talking about the Communist Party and the Communist Manifesto and communist policy and that kind of thing earlier, and you studied it a lot when you were in college.
Yes, I did.
But the thing is, can you imagine? That's happened over and over again in the history of the world.
Well, and that's why in the Communist Manifesto, it sounds very utopian, but in our human existence, it has never been achieved. And hundreds of millions of people have been killed in the name of that. Because what happens is people get greedy, people get controlling. People can't handle money, they can't handle power, they can't handle lust. And so
they can't handle people saying no or standing up for their rights.
Right. But if you read the Communist Manifesto, the first thing that you have to do to achieve this, right? The number one is you have to get rid of the family.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So you have to get rid of the family because it's not fair. You have a family. Well, they don't have a family. And you are encouraging them. Well, they don't have anybody encouraging them. Oh, and you may give him some money to help him out. Well, he doesn't have money to help him out. So they have all these reasons talking about equity or equality. It used to be equality. Now it's just equity, which is nowhere near the same. But that's how they justify getting rid of the family. And the real reason is you cannot have bonds with other people.
That's it.
You can't have community. You can't have people who care about you.
Loyalty, commitment is out.
Yeah, no, you can't have that. They need you desperate. They need you alone. So you got to get rid of the family. All of the family. Nothing. Right. All of it. And then you have to get rid of all religion because it gives hope. And if you have hope, but they don't have hope, if that's how you got to get rid of that. It's not fair that you have hope, but really it is. Hope makes you not controllable. If you are not, if you're depressed and dismal, you'll follow just somebody's offering you something, right? And you don't think you can do it. You're so downtrodden. But if you have hope, which, Christianity is a lot of hope. Judaism is a lot of hope, believing in God. If you have that, well, they got to get rid of that. They got to get rid of that.
Right. And because that was a threat to power, a threat to their power and their control. And
it brings people together, and family brings people together.
Right.
Yeah.
And anytime I hear the thought of giving up rights that we've been given through our Constitution, anytime someone talks about relieving us of our rights, that smacks to me of the communist spirit. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that appearances are more important than substance, how things look, not what things are. And we see that even in our political, even with our president, how things look. I mean, they'll flat out lie to you. There's no problem at the border. Their border's secure. We have millions of people coming across the border. If you're in Texas and you go down there, they are pouring through. Like, they open the gates for a bunch of, like it's a baseball game at Ranger Stadium. We're all waiting for the gates to open. They open the gate and everybody just pours in. And when I was young, we were all trying to get the best seats, right? And it is like that. They've had 4 million people since Biden became president. 4 million in less than a year and a half.
Yeah.
And so they'll just flat out say there's not, so they give an appearance of something. But with families, it's the family photo. Oh, it doesn't matter how much you get beaten. That family photo, everyone smiles. Yeah. Everyone looks good. And I can pick them out on social media. I know what they look like. I've worked with families long enough for over 20 years. I can spot them like that. And it's all about the way things look. The photos look great. Everything looks great. And this is where social media brings a lot of comparison. And people get depressed because they think my life doesn't look like that. Look at that family. They are so happy. Well, I know those families, that couple's about to divorce, right? But appearances, or that child is being beaten, it's just really, really sad. So denial is rampant in narcissistic people.
The term gaslighting became popular some time ago through the movie Gaslight. And but that happens so much, which feeds into the idea of denial.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, gaslighting, it means telling you things that aren't true and making them real and pretending.
Right.
And they know it's not true. They're gaslighting you.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of pretending going on during COVID. We're in the medical field, so we just knew what they were saying wasn't true. And it didn't make any sense to us whatsoever, based on everything we knew about medicine and everything we knew about viruses. It just made no sense, right? And we saw people following. It was the most bizarre thing. And we saw people we trusted and admired for years, doctors. I mean, some even nominated for the Nobel Prize. The media made them out to be, they don't know what they're talking about. They're not very good at what they do. And they canceled them.
Vilified.
Yeah. So what it does with denial was rampant. And just total denial and, flat out lying, gaslighting about everything.
Yeah.
And eventually it gets to be that in a family that is that severe, lying goes on all the time. Denial goes on all the time. Denying that they're doing anything wrong, denying even that they're hurting the scapegoat and what they're doing to that child, or that they have their favorite child. Mm-hmm. So often what will happen is these children will grow up and they'll have their favorite child.
Yeah.
And it just continues. There is no safety, though, eventually. There's no safety in that family, because even though one is scapegoated, nobody feels safe. Nobody.
No, because there's a dynamic. Like you said, the walking on eggshells dynamic. Everyone's afraid of the person who is the power person.
Yes.
Yeah, and so they have to be careful about what they say, what they think. Nobody can feel or anything like that. Yeah.
Yes. And so why do I know so much about this? There was 5 years in my childhood when my mom married a man who became very violent. And it was 5 years of terror and fear before we got away. And all of these qualities for as a child happened, except we did not have the golden child. I didn't see that, but it was terrifying. And it was toxic. It was confusing. Everything right was wrong and wrong was right.
Yeah.
And luckily we had been living long enough and our mom had raised us completely different that we as children knew this was not good.
Yeah.
But our mom was afraid, and so she went along with all this stuff in a lot of ways. But, she was afraid too. And so, when you look at what it's like, and things, in his case, alcohol, and he was abused as a child. So his dad was a narcissist, and so it followed through. And so there were reasons for that. But for us, it was terrifying. And then he was gone. It took 5 years, but those 5 years were traumatizing.
Oh, they honestly, in some ways, they ruined the lives of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And,
yes.
and from experiences that they had that no child should ever have to go through. Ever.
Yeah. And I was in gymnastics and a lot of things, so I wasn't always home. So I was spared a lot of it in a lot of ways. I also would just, the minute I heard his voice, I would run. If he came in, I could tell, I would listen, but I didn't sleep deeply. I was always listening. And so when he sounded like he sounded when he got a little crazy, I jumped out the window and nobody else went with me. It was dangerous. It was like the third floor, kind of. Yeah. So anyway, so I know what it feels like. And then I studied Russian history in college. It wasn't my major, but I became fascinated because I really liked the professor, and I became fascinated with Russia, and I took Russian, and learning about what happened. And then from there, knowing we've all felt like with Germany, how could this have happened? How could they have done this to the Jews? How could the Germans have let this happen?
Yeah.
Right? And so same thing with Russia. It was Stalin. The exact same thing happened in Russia that happened in Germany. It is happening here, and people are going along with it, and it has to stop. And, and it looks like it may stop, but you have just got to realize what it's like. And the rise in narcissism, in our country is one of the main causes
I was
of this political.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to mention too, the fact that this narcissistic communistic system is totally bankrupt, and we know it has been tried over and over and over again, and it just destroys countries.
It does.
I was in Russia in 1990, visiting my daughter there, and I saw such degradation of the material aspect of their country, the communities in particular that were falling apart, and the grand parts of Moscow and Russia. I said, well, what about this? And my daughter said, we leave that here. They leave this here because it looks great. But this is all, Stalin killed people and took the money from his people to build all this.
Yes.
And, he was a killer. He was a killer. And narcissism left to go its own way becomes that.
Yes. That's why narcissism, socialism, communism, they're all tied up together. It's important. Evil. Narcissism has to exist and become rampant in society for it to thrive, for socialism to communism to thrive, or Nazism, whatever you call that. It ends up killing so many people. And we've had so many people killed in our country in the name of not agreeing, right? Gaslighting, making people out to be evil when they're not. Oh, I can't calling them Hitler. I mean, every Republican's been called Hitler since I was a kid. So for me, it's like everyone calls him Hitler. The crazy thing is that it became so crazy with Trump. People really believed it, right? And they've gaslighted him. It's so crazy. But what's important about the brainwashing with narcissists is that you have to understand when people present a family member with the reality about their dad or their mom, those kids have been taught to feel bad for that person. So even though people will point out to them how they lied or these things aren't true, and they see that it's not true, and they have evidence it's not true, you can't change their mind about the person. So no matter, like about COVID, no matter what comes out about COVID, no matter how much you realize about natural immunity, you will still, if you are the people that demonize the people who did not get the vaccine, no matter what comes out, because they did such a brainwashing on you, and it was from all sides, all day long. I was at my mom's and the TV was on like 5 hours and it was nonstop. COVID, 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 COVID. The non-vaccine, the non-vaccine. That is how they brainwash. Repetitive state media. And I don't care what you're watching, okay? If you're watching regular news, it's doing a number on what they want you to think. So no matter what comes out in reality about COVID, it's hard for you to ever catch up. It's hard for you to be able to just look at reality. So kids that grow up in that family, it's hard for them to adjust to the normal world when they get out. And that's the hard thing.
Yeah, this reminds me of a guy who came into the therapist's office, and he reported that as a part of his story that his dad had beaten him every day of his life. And he said, if I idolized my dad, but he beat me every day. I didn't understand. He said, if I had just been a better kid, he wouldn't have beaten me like that.
Yeah.
And, nothing is further from the truth, but it's what you were saying. Mm-hmm. It's that that the kids who grow up in a situation like that, in a way, feel sorry for the perpetrator.
Right.
And who does that? Only someone whose brain is so affected that they can't think clearly.
So if you're dating, and we're going to talk more about this. We're going to do a whole series on this. So if you happen to be dating somebody that is a narcissist, okay, they have to make you feel bad for them. You want to help them out. You want to rescue them, something like that. And so they have to kind of make you feel bad for them, right? And that's how you're endeared to them. So anyway, just thank you so much for helping me today with this.
My pleasure to talk about this with you.
Yes, we just finally have just kind of gotten fed up with, we have been seeing more and more narcissistic families coming in, and it's just, kids are learning watching the news. They're learning watching, they're fighting in schools. There's so many fights in schools. If they don't disagree with you, let's go beat them up. And, if we don't like him, we don't like a teacher, let's just make up stuff and get him fired. Okay.
We've seen that. Yeah.
It's just horrible what's happening to these kids. These kids are getting so messed up. So we just decided we have got to start talking about what's happening. Yeah. And we see it from families because of people we work with. We see it from individuals. Of course, we see it on TV. More than enough people are talking about that. We don't need to talk about that. You got your ears full all the time. But we want you to understand it's very, very much the same.
Would you mind if I read some of these? Do we have time to do this? Just a few of the characteristics from the diagnostic manual that we use. Here's a narcissistic personality disorder person. He has a grandiose sense of self-importance. He requires excessive admiration. He has a sense of entitlement. He's interpersonally exploitative. That is, he takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends. He lacks empathy. He shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. And these to an excess. This is not someone who is, you could say, okay, he's kind of arrogant.
And there are more. We'll talk more about those.
Yeah.
We tried to explain it in a way that you would understand it. The medical guide can get a little heady for people.
Can, yeah.
But also you don't have to have, there's like 10 and you only have to have 5 of those. But it is, really narcissism and the dynamics of evil. Right. And so when
you could write a book on that.
Yeah. So when I said narcissism, socialism, communism, I also have to say Satanism. They all go together eventually. So ergo the end times, right? So not to scare anyone, but I'm just saying they are all very similar. If you live with a real narcissist personality disorder, you will feel like they are evil, like there's evil in them at times. So if it's rampant and they do it all the time, so that's we'll talk about all that. I thank you so much for spending the time with us, and thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, and thanks for joining us. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Take care.